Hello, I'm the Trek Lad, and this is my review of Star Trek Discovery's 5th season episode, Labyrinths. In this episode, Burnham gets trapped in a dangerous mindscape as part of a test to retrieve the final clue that will show them the way to the progenitor's tech. Meanwhile, the Breen, now hot on Discovery's tail, face internal challenges, Reese and the Discovery are forced to get creative in the Badlands, and Book wears some robes. A quick heads up, this video contains spoilers, so if you've not yet watched this episode, this might not be the video for you. If you're just looking for my overall thoughts on this episode, you can skip to the timestamp shown here on screen. Let's warp into this. For a while, Labyrinths feels like a return to the fun adventure of the season's first 2 episodes. The pre-release promised that Discovery's final season would be an epic quest, like some sort of Indiana Jones in space, actually felt like it might be back on track. But, as we've seen multiple times this season, this latest episode gives us an intriguing setup that falls apart by the end thanks to questionable decisions, nonsensical developments, and the show's annoying need to tie everything into sappy self-reflection. The episode begins with the Discovery's mission for the final clue requiring a choppy trip through the Badlands. This raised an eyebrow. I don't remember the Badlands being quite this bad, with Deep Space Nine and Voyager showing ships manoeuvring through the region with not so much as a bump, let alone a near 75% shield drain. Any excuse for those bloody bridge flamethrowers, I guess. All this is to reach the Eternal Gallery and Archive, essentially a giant space library staffed by cheery book nuns. It's an impressive setting that feels like a fresh change from Trek's over-reliance on virtual sets and that same Toronto woodland they always seem to use. I liked it. I also liked the cheery book nun, that's her name, I can't remember her actual name, that accompanies Burnham and Book. It's not mentioned, but this character, with her distinctive forehead ridges, long whitish hair, and blue eyes, looks a lot like an Afrosian, an alien race we first saw on the bridge of the Saratoga in the voyage home, and perhaps more memorably, Kurtwood Smith's Federation president in the Undiscovered Country. In an interesting small scene, we see Book recover preserved tree roots from his now destroyed homeworld of Quajan. David Ajala's book is a major highlight of this episode, particularly in this scene. His reaction to discovering that a part of his homeworld, and by extension his people, still exists is genuinely affecting, a rare moment where Discovery's emotional insistence actually lands. With the idea already planted that the progenitor's tech can revive life, I do wonder if this small moment is designed to go somewhere. Some sort of emotional finale that sees Quajan reborn feels right out of the show's feel-good playbook. Personally, I much prefer the idea of the progenitor's tech not actually being able to do any of this, instead forcing Book, much like Mal with Locke, to accept what has happened and move on with the new family he's gone on to find. We will see, won't we? The episode's big concept, a mystery adventure inside Burnham's mind that's manifested as this massive library, is a good idea that ultimately fizzles out. Burnham being trapped inside some sort of mindscape program that has to play out feels very similar to the Catan probe seen in TNG's classic 6th season episode, The Inner Light, right down to Culber's inability to move the captain for fear of harming her. In the mindscape, Burnham is tested by a program that takes the form of Book. Again, Ajala is on top form with a more rigid posture, pronounced accent, and quietly snarky attitude that effectively distinguishes him from his real-world counterpart. Now, while all this looks good, and I'm not just talking about Book, after a while it becomes clear the episode doesn't really know how to resolve any of this. Burnham rifles through a load of books with more references to the Dominion War, uses sand to navigate through the maze, and that's about it. There's none of that exciting ingenuity we've come to see from this character so many times in the past. She just kind of gives up. And that's because, really, this was all just a setup for a big old moment of self-reflection and discovery. With the lights literally turning off around her, Burnham, in her best teary and whispery self, confesses her big fears of failure, of not being a good enough captain, friend, or partner, and her regrets over not being able to tell the real Book how she really feels. For a second, I actually bought all of this, and that's mostly down to Sonequa Martin-Green, whose committed performance perfectly captures Burnham's vulnerable state. Her words also carry a bit of a meta feel, the idea that perhaps Martin-Green has been burdened by a pressure to live up to all the greats from Trek's past. but that feeling quickly goes away as it's revealed this was all part of the test, and Burnham passed. Of course she did. Leave it to this show to take a cool sci-fi concept like a virtual labyrinth holding virtual information that can only be unlocked via a therapy session. To give the episode some credit, this does fit with the idea that the puzzle was designed by a Betazoid, and I did predict a couple of episodes ago that we were likely in for one of the show's more emotional episodes because of this. But that didn't stop me from laughing at it. It's so cliched. Elsewhere, we get some big developments, particularly with Moll and the Breen, who successfully tracked the Discovery to the archive with predictably destructive results. No Saru for a 5th straight episode, but another Discovery veteran, the horribly underused Reese, gets a small moment to sit in the chair and actually show us what he can do. It's a nice moment, although definitely a case of too little, too late. The episode ends with Burnham forced to hand over the puzzle map thing, but not before making a copy and faking the Discovery's destruction with a cleverly timed spore jump. Not so clever, however, was Burnham's decision to hand over the map, which, much like her big Prime Directive dilemma a few weeks ago, felt like a decision that came far too easily. A massive gamble considering the potentially devastating consequences of the Breen locating the tech first. In the midst of all this, on the Breen Dreadnought, Moll stages a mini coup, rising up against the cartoonishly evil Breen Primarch, taking him out and assuming rule of his faction as the wife of the dead Scion. Cool. Knowing what we know about the Breen, a ruthless, warlike race whose xenophobia makes the Romulans look neighbourly by comparison, I obviously have a few questions. Why would the Primarch keep Moll, a constant dissenting voice, hanging around like that? If he wanted all the information she had on the progenitor's tech, why not just extract it with one of those cortical implants we saw back in DS9's Till Death Do Us Part? With the location of the final clue known, why didn't the Primarch just get rid of Moll? Now, we learn over the course of the episode that the Primarch doesn't give a shit about things like blood oaths, so why the need to keep her alive? Why would he do this? Why is she there? How are the legions of Breen, shown at the start of the episode to be fanatical to the cause, so okay with any of what's going on? Why is this taking place on just one big open plan deck? What happened to things like rooms? The Breen were once one of Trek's great enduring mysteries, a race who remained threatening because we just didn't know anything about them. But thanks to Discovery's world building, the Breen are now little more than a budget fusion of the Klingons and Kazon, made out of fucking flubber who just so happen to have really big ships. This sucks. Labyrinths is the latest chapter in what has so far been a mostly disappointing final season of Discovery. It's an episode that promises a return to some sort of fun adventure, but ultimately ends up being another frustrating slog that poses more questions than answers. In typical Discovery fashion, it fails to find balance. It wastes its ideas, being stubbornly focused on emotional sentiment over anything else. Most of it just doesn't make sense. Internal continuity doesn't seem to be a thing. Everything is inconsequential. The action scenes are bland and mostly unseen, and that lovely, cheery book nun doesn't even get any kind of send-off. No one seems to care, so why should I? The most annoying thing is this episode does give us some small moments of legitimate quality. But just like Reese in the command chair, it's not enough, and at this late stage, these bright spots are more like cruel teases of the show that Discovery could have been. I'm giving Labyrinths a 5 out of 10. But what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments section below, and if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more reviews like this coming soon. Until next time, I'm the Trek Lad. Live long and prosper.